everyone. This is Samira Daswani, the host of the podcast, The Patient from Hell. I have the utmost pleasure of having two incredible guests with me today, and I am sure that you are going to love hearing their story and listening to what they have to share with us today. Thank you, Michael and Ashlee, for joining me. I know you guys have your own podcast as well, so we're going to maybe start there. Do you guys want to talk a bit about what your podcast is called?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
We're so honored. You're so cool.
That's how I feel about you guys.
Patient from Hell, though. Okay, we're Michael and Mom Talk Cancer. You're like Patient from Hell. I love that so much. I guess I just gave it away. What is our podcast called, Michael?
Our podcast is called Michael and Mom Talk Cancer.
He's Michael and I'm Mom.
So clearly I have been through cancer. I am actually the cancer survivor. My mom is my caregiver. So Michael and Mom, we just became a duo because in the hospital, it's funny. Like sometimes the doctors just call the caregiver, which is my mom, they call her Mom. Not our doctors because they know her very well.
They got to know me.
But in the beginning, if you don't know, because I was in a children's hospital, so a lot of the time it's like they're talking to Mom, talking to either someone's dad or so it's Mom. But then we just made a joke and we were like, we're Michael and Mom. And then we became Michael and Mom Talk Cancer, and that was how the podcast started.
I've decided even for tax purposes, I should just change it legally to MOM.
To Mom.
I'm like, I think legally I should just do it. It'll be easier.
Michael, how old were you when you got diagnosed?
19. I'm 22 now.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So I wasn't in a children's hospital, but I could have been an adult. But I'm happy I was in the children's, and now I'm at the adult.
Both.
Yeah.
Now you're both.
Yeah, both.
But so happy that he was at a children's hospital because, well, I don't know if you want us to get into the story, but it was during COVID. And so at that time we had like heard stories of people that like someone they knew was in the hospital with COVID or other things, and they couldn't have any visitors. No one could be there. And because he was in a children's hospital, they allowed a parent. They even allowed two parents, and he only has one parent. But so they would let me and also my older son, Steven, to come. And like, I didn't leave his side. I felt so blessed about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 19 is a weird age. It's like the in-between,
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys have been through this. I know your story, and let me maybe talk a little bit about how we met. And then I would love for you guys to tell your full story. So we met because we both were, all three of us were speaking at CancerCon this summer, August, right? August.
Yeah, it was August.
And I had the utmost pleasure of seeing Michael and Mom perform on stage. And I say perform because they were sharing that story, but it is so inspirational the way you guys deliver the story. So I absolutely loved it. And I think that was when we had the genesis of having you guys on our podcast.
We felt the same about you because you were on just before us and we were like, wow, she's amazing. The way you did the interview was just like amazing. So it's very reciprocal. The admiration is definitely reciprocal.
100%.
Yeah.
So with that, do you guys want to share your story?
Yeah. So
it's an age before beauty, or wait, I don't know. Beauty before age.
Whatever you want. You're the beautiful one.
Go beauty.
So when I was 19 years old, well, actually started when I was 18, because during the COVID lockdown, we were home from college. It was March of 2020. I was 18 years old, and my birthday was in May. So during the middle of the lockdown, I turned 19. And during that time, I had been really, really tired. For a few months, I was just tired, wasn't feeling like myself. I obviously thought it was because of COVID lockdown happening, that like we were just stuck at home, not in school, not doing the usual stuff, the activities I was doing. Because I was a surfer, I was a windsurfer. I was actually on the Olympic development team for windsurfing. And I'd done a lot of physical stuff before. I was very active, always in the gym. And during that time, I started to lose a little bit of weight. I wasn't feeling as well because I would do like home workouts and stuff. I wasn't feeling as well in the home workouts. And I started to get some night sweats and then eventually fevers. So that's what led me to go to the doctor. I did some blood work. And then she recommended me to a specialist. The specialist did some blood work of his own at the Children's Hospital, Nicholas Children's Hospital. And the next day, he did a bone marrow biopsy, and then I found out I had leukemia/lymphoma. And then 3 weeks later, he diagnosed me with hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma. So it was a shock. I mean, I lost my father to cancer 4 years before I was diagnosed. So hearing lymphoma again was like crazy to hear that. Just did not think I was going to get lymphoma, especially when I was 19. My father passed away
A baby.
late 50s.
Yeah.
And 60. So it was just like, I was like, no way. Like, I'm 19. Like, I have still so much to do. And the doctor told me I had to go through 2 to 6 rounds of chemotherapy and then a bone marrow transplant. I went through 3 rounds of chemotherapy, immediately lost my hair. But the good thing was I had this amazing support system, and I still do, including my mom, all my friends, and I was really physical during treatment. I tried to work out on the days that I could. And then after I had a bone marrow transplant, and that was like physically the hardest thing because I had, 12 sessions of radiation. I had total body radiation, blast to my lungs, and we spent 6 weeks in the hospital for my BMT. And that was like the hardest thing because I was just out for those 6 weeks, like in the bed, vomiting, popped blood vessels in my eyes. My left eye basically couldn't see anything because I had popped blood vessels. It was just, I was hallucinating. I almost passed away from Grafton syndrome. I had so much swelling in my heart and lungs. Like, it was crazy. I was seeing people that weren't even in the room. Those 6 weeks were extremely difficult. And then after that, I thought I was going to be okay because I had the bone marrow transplant, I had the chemo, and that's all they told me there was for my treatment plan. So I figured I was going to go home, slowly start going to hospital less, and get back to my life. But I developed graft versus host disease. Basically, the donor stem cells from my bone marrow transplant just like started attacking my major organs and ended up becoming chronic. And the 2 years after my transplant, leading up to now, I spent so much time in the hospital. Like, we were there for 5 months at one point because I was so sick with chronic, and now I have chronic GVHD, and I'm still in treatment. So it's been a crazy long, journey that I'm still in. I have treatment next week. I do treatment twice a week, every other week. I'm on a combo of immunosuppressants and just a treatment that calms down my immune system by weakening my blood. So it's been a crazy journey, and we just do our best to advocate now. And like we always say, like, love is what has got us through everything. That was our speech at CancerCon, was love. And we're just huge believers in that when you have the right support system, you can get through almost anything.
Before I talk, have anything you want to say there, Samira?
I went off, but I just had to share. Like,
I
it
know.
was a simplified version.
I didn't want to interrupt you. It was
actually a simplified version because there's so much more, but I didn't want to take up too much time.
Exactly.
The reason you see me smiling is we've been doing this podcast for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
And we've had a lot of people come to our podcast, and we've actually had a mom and a son duo recently.
Nice.
And the reason you saw me smile is because I think what you said at the very end is what I was smiling about. Your synopsis of the last 2 years was so factual. It was just like, this happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. This is just, it happened. You kind of, there's acceptance to it, right?
Yeah.
There's, oh gosh, well that's been our theme actually since day one, was the acceptance, and that, it's not what happens, it's how you react. Of course, everyone has heard that, but it's different to hear it and to try to embody it.
It's totally two different things.
It is two different things, but that really has been one of our themes from the actual get-go. Like, I literally remember when Michael, that day, it happened very fast, as he said. Like, he was tired for a while, but tired, like, tell me if you know someone that's not tired. Like, come on, everyone is tired. And COVID, and it was so dumb,
But it wasn't tired, it was like exhaustion.
Okay. But I actually thought it was because he wasn't surfing and sailing and doing the things he loves, because, that's when we tend to, like, feel down, is when we can't do the things we love. And the beaches were closed. It was a really hard time. But when he got the fevers and night sweats, that's when everything started happening really fast. We saw the doctor. It was 3 days later. She was like, there's a specialist I want you to see. The same day he was like, come today. The next morning was the bone marrow biopsy. And after, like directly, as soon as the biopsy ended, he walked in the room and told us Michael had a blood cancer. He wasn't sure which one. So the culmination happened in like 4 days, like really, really fast. And the thing I remember is when I called Michael is a middle kid. He has an older brother, Stephen, and a younger sister, Jennifer, but they're very close in age. They're a year and a half apart, Stephen and Michael, and then 2.5 years with my younger daughter, Jennifer. My daughter was actually at a dance class when he was diagnosed, but my son, Stephen, was at the gym. So I called Stephen, and he literally came directly to the hospital. But I remember the first thing that we talked about was like, Michael didn't say, why me? And it actually, the entire time, even to this day, I think, I'm not saying he doesn't have his moments like, why me? This sucks. But the majority of the time has not been like, why me? It's been, it happened. So what do we do? And how do
Yeah.
we react? And I think that's a huge part of it. And it's true, we have had each other, and that's helped.
I want you guys to talk a bit more about that actually, because I actually very much relate for what it's worth. I remember because I got diagnosed, I was 30. My mom flew in from India. So slightly different age. I did not have the privilege of being at a children's hospital, although I get it. We worked with children's hospitals before, and they are a very, very special place within the healthcare ecosystem, right? Like
Yes.
I think they have a different philosophy, a different mindset, and I do think that is, if you could pick,
Everyone should be at a children's hospital.
I agreed. I mean, ideally not in the hospital at all, but yes, if you're in the hospital, then
That's what I think. That's what I meant. It's such a different experience than my husband, but that's also another story. But it's such a different experience than what we went through with him. But I'll let you keep going.
That was actually going to be my question: is where you just went with it, right? Because I think in the story that I know you guys have gone through, you've gone through it now twice.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable with it, I'd love for you to talk about the first time and how that may have prepared or not prepared you for the second time as well.
It's been so different. Patrice, my husband, when he was diagnosed, it was also a surprise. Of course, he was having back pain. For him, he was having back pain. He saw a chiropractor and he was like, man, that chiropractor messed me up. It's even worse. Ended up going in, did an MRI, and called me, and he was like, he said, it's going to take a week for the results, but immediately called me from the hospital saying, they told me I have cancer. And I was like, what? The difference is, I'm going to give you a story. Can I give you a story that I don't ever share? I haven't really shared this story. And this is not personally against this doctor, but for example, because of where his cancer was, it was a lymphoma, but it was found in the base of his spine. And so he was going right away. They said, we're going to start chemo with you, but we want to put an Omaya. And Omaya is actually a port in your head. Mm-hmm. So the chemo would go through his spinal column just to make sure, because of the tumor being so close to his spine, they wanted to make sure. And I remember, so he had been diagnosed the day before. The next day, a brain surgeon came in and started telling us all of the risks of putting in the Omaya. And so I remember saying to him, wait, is it necessary? And he looked at me and he was like, forget it. I'm taking him off the schedule. And he walked out of the room.
What?
Yeah, maybe he was having a bad day, but he was like, don't question me. And I remember so clearly, Patrice and I looking at each other, and I started sobbing, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I think oh my God. And I remember calling the oncologist, like, I hope I didn't mess it up. I just wanted to understand if it was actually necessary. But if it's necessary, please, I don't want to have made this doctor angry. But I'm not going to say that's been our whole experience with adult doctors, because we've actually, Michael, as he said, is treated now at 2 different hospitals, pediatric and adult. And we're having a great experience at his adult hospital. Amazing. But it was with my husband also because he was more outpatient with most of his chemos. We never got to know anyone. I never knew a nurse. They, it was just so different. And with Michael, we've known everyone by first name. And I think it did prepare us. We've had that experience. And I think we also went into it and maybe it was us too. Like, okay, we're just going to take this on. And I remember Patrice and I were just going to take this on and we're going to keep this story, just in our family and private and get through it. And with Michael right away, we were just like open and vulnerable. And maybe that was a lesson we learned. And maybe that being more open and vulnerable, maybe that let people in as well. So, of course you always learn from mistakes. I don't want to say we made mistakes with Patrice. It is what it was, but we did learn a lot. And gosh, adult hospitals and those walls, and it was so amazing to be in a place with colors. Even though it was COVID, there weren't like parties happening, and it wasn't the same social aspect that I think happens a lot of times in children's hospitals. But it was still, there was just like this feeling of love. And I do think also, I don't want to speak for Michael, I'm sure he's going to want to say something, but having been through it, we were like, okay, we didn't get through it this time. We're doing it for your dad. We're doing it for Patrice. Like, he is watching over us. And I don't know, we always felt like there was that energy there as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah. And with Patrice, the difference was also, I had 3 young kids. When he was diagnosed, they were 10, 12, and 14. And I had to work to pay the bills because he couldn't work. And I was taking care of the kids. So I was very much like, taking care of him for me felt like making his life easier. And with Michael, when he was diagnosed, I was just like, oh my God, you go into mom mode. I was like, I don't care how the bills are going to get paid, but I'm stopping everything. And our family unit was just me and my other 2 kids. We would be with Michael as much as we could. I was with him all the time. They would be at the hospital as much as they could. So in that way, it was a little different because I think with Patrice, and again, don't want to say mistakes, but I felt like I wanted to ease his burden. With Michael, I was like, we're just all together. We're just always all together as much as we could. But that was also the gift of a children's hospital, is we could really be together.
This was not in the questions I sent you, but if you're willing, can you talk a bit about how you manage work, paying the bills, and everything that's happened in the last 3 years? Because you don't have Patrice in your life. You don't have a cousin galore. I imagine that's
Honestly, Medicare, Medicaid, grants that we've applied for.
mm,
I've had some help with my family has helped us out. We have had to resort to a GoFundMe. And yeah, I haven't bought anything for myself in a long time. But we're okay. We've managed to do it, but now I work a little bit from home, which has helped, but there was a long time that I didn't. And I'm fortunate I had a very close friend that set up a GoFundMe that helped me a lot, especially in that first year that I couldn't do anything else. And it's not just the paying the bills and not having the Patrice. Like, I've seen parents that are divorced still come together when the child gets sick. And I'm like, it's not divorced, it's he's gone. And it is a challenge. There's a lot of times, and I'm just like, I want to talk to him. And then I'm like, and I question myself sometimes because, Michael is very wise and very smart. He knows all of his treatments. He knows his medications. He's not sitting back and going along for the ride. He's been very involved. However, there were times when he was in the bone marrow transplant, when he was out of it. And those 5 months when he was in the hospital, he was near to death a lot of that time. And so I was the person making the decisions, of course. And so in those moments, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had someone else. I hope I'm making the right decisions. There was a moment I was advocating to get him off a drug because I felt like it was just harming him more than helping him. And I was like, am I doing the right thing? So I was by myself making that decision for my kid. And that has definitely been a challenge too. But thank God he's so smart. He's 22, but he's like 100. He's so smart. And from the beginning, he's been very involved. So it's been amazing.
Can I maybe actually go to where you were going right now and ask Michael you a couple questions if you're okay with it?
Yeah, of course.
So there are 2 threads I wanted to pull with you. One is in the AYA community. And I think it varies quite a bit based on how old someone is when they get diagnosed, right? But AYA, for our audience, it's adolescent and young adults. Michael and I technically both fall into the same kind of umbrella, right? Very different types of cancers, very different life stages, but we're sort of clubbed under this like broad umbrella of AYA. So the theme I want to unpack with you, Michael, is for you, athleticism and the identity of being a athlete was core to your life, right? And I know we spoke about it briefly when we met in person. I know that shifted. And if you're okay with it, I'd love for you to talk about it, because I think that is true for a lot of the community, especially the AYA community, right? Because sports and athletics is such a big part of growing up, exploring your potential, exploring the physical body, exploring your kind of endurance. And if you're okay with it, I'd love for you to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was immediately like, I had this physique that I had been building for over a year in the gym. Like, I was so proud of how I had gained like 20 pounds in a year, stayed the same body fat.
I mean, he was always an athlete, but in his first year of college,
yeah, I really started to lift weights a lot and get great physique, and I was really happy. And I got cancer, and then I was like, okay, it's okay. I'm gonna be back in like a few months, like maybe 6 months, working out like how I was before. Because I was like, I have chemo and then a bone marrow transplant. It's gonna happen pretty fast. So I thought I was gonna be good after. And that was my goal. My goal was just like, I'm gonna get back my physique. I'm gonna be able to say I went through cancer and got this physique back. And then it didn't happen like that. I was working out after my transplant, but I was on so many steroids that caused necrosis, that caused me to not be able to work out like I used to. I mean, I just worked out now for like an hour, but it was like completely different than what I used to do. And I had to modify everything now because I can't do deadlifts, I can't do squats, I can't jump, I can't run, I can't lift heavy weights. So I do light weights, I do like a stationary bike, I do certain leg exercises. And losing like the athlete side is really hard because some days I just don't know how to cope. And it's hard to not, because I used to cope. Like, I would go outside and go skating if I was like mad at something, like, and I can't skate, or go on like not a run, but like something like that, and I just can't do that anymore. And it's extremely difficult, but I've found other things. And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to come back and be an athlete, I'm like, no, people tell me I'm going to come back. And they're like, you're going to be an athlete again. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get muscular again. You're going to be able to do the things you used to do. I'm like, well, I'm being realistic. I'm not. And that's okay. I found other things that keep me extremely happy. Like, I've been playing electric guitar now, and that's been one of my things, which I love. And I'm just so happy I found music, because I'm like, okay, I feel so happy playing it. It's not the same as windsurfing or surfing, but it's just as equal as an amazing feeling I get. And I can do so many other things, like advocate, do podcasts, help others, lead support groups. There's always things in life that are going to make you feel a certain way that other things made you feel. And you just have to find those, modify it, and adapt. And I always talk about that, is not playing the victim role when you get something like cancer or chronic illness. And a lot of people do, and not to like be like not make fun of them, but like make them feel worse. But you can't be a victim. When you have something like a chronic illness, you can't just be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My life sucks. I'm going to sit around all day watching TV and be sad. Like, you have to get off the couch, do something, and figure your stuff out, because or else your life is going to be miserable, and it's going to be worse for the people around you.
Yeah.
Like, if not doing it for yourself, do it for those around you, because you don't know how long you're going to have this disease for. You don't know if you're going to live, but you just have to be able to find that happiness, because it's your life, and that's it.
And it is true, it sucks.
It sucks, yeah.
It sucks. Like, we're not saying, oh yay,
like,
cancer.
I cry about this stuff. Like, I get emotional about this. I hate it sometimes, but you can't
stay there.
You cannot.
Like that, I remember saying that, like, now we kind of talk about bouncing forward and bouncing back. Maybe we're gonna get to that later.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, I would always say it's our cha-cha. It's like,
right,
we go forward, and then there's a day
back.
that you're like, bam, back, and sometimes not even just back, like on your butt, but then you just get up.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
The music starts, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna keep my cha-cha going, and it is definitely like, I know at CancerCon, there was a whole session talking about toxic positivity. And I do not believe that we are toxically positive. We have positivity. We do fun things. We do laugh. We do have fun. We do make up raps in the hospital. Like, but there's also moments where like, oh my God, yeah, this totally sucks. And you have every right to cry and every right to complain, but then get it out and then move forward. Because mental health is huge, as you know, which is probably why you started the podcast, which is why we started the podcast. We started the podcast, for ourselves to talk, to share, to help yourself. And oftentimes the best way to help yourself is to help others. And that's just also been one of our themes.
I love that you touched on toxic positivity. I think that's where it's so funny. It's because of the work. I'm sure you guys have some experiences, right? Where once you're in the community, you meet others in the community.
Yes. We live with others in the community. Like those are our people.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I think people have very different approaches to it, right? I think the three of us definitely share it. We definitely share this, right? Which is very realistic, very somewhat data driven, right? Like this is just the reality of the situation, and this is the reality of the life we have, and there are good days and there are bad days, and you deal and you get through it, and you maintain a like positive outlook, but you're realistic about the positive outlook, right? It's I've heard you say it so many times, Michael, today, right? So I think we share that. And then I've met people where and it works. That's the amazing part. It works. Complete denial, but it works. It works for them, and it always surprises me because it's just not how I function.
No, it's true. It's like it reminds me of that thing where if you smile, like it actually makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like that, the toxic
but
positivity.
That is true. And that's not
true.
Toxic
it's not
positivity.
Maybe it's not a good example.
That is not a good example because
it's not a good...
I smile like a lot.
I know you have smile lines, and so do I.
I have so many wrinkles. I keep saying, that's why I'm so wrinkly. It's because I smile.
Well, it's better to be wrinkly and happy.
Better to be wrinkly and happy. No, but that was a bad example. But it is true when you know that thing that when you smile, your brain thinks you're happy. I'm sure you know that because you're a very smart girl. Oh. But you know what it is for us? It's like we do talk about love, and you heard us talk a lot about love, and we do believe love has been like huge. It's
our
been
4-letter word.
It's our 4-letter word. It's been huge, but we also know it's not a cure, and so sometimes I feel like the toxic positivity is sometimes from the outside, when people are like, just stay strong, and you're like, okay.
I think it usually comes more from the outside because people send you these messages, and I've had a lot of these personally. People say, you know what, I had this cancer and now I'm like back to doing everything even better than before, so you're gonna be fine. Like I have people tell me like, you're gonna be fine, dude. I've been through cancer. You're gonna be back to yourself. And I'm like, it's not always the same. So I don't think you can ever speak to anyone else's journey. Like, going a little off topic, but yeah.
I'm actually super glad you just went there. I'm actually very, very happy you just went there because I think what you're describing, Michael, has happened to me God knows how many times, and it's there is something about the biology here that I'm sorry, guys, I'm a nerd.
I think we are too a little bit.
Exactly right. Especially I'm guessing, Michael, when you got diagnosed so young and you've gone through it once before, like you kind of have to be right. You have to look.
You have to understand.
And you have to be when I'm hearing your story, Ashlee, about you like trying to get him off a specific drug. Like I'm imagining that there were hours spent trying to understand and like get if it exists, and talk to people who've been on it or not been on it, and like I'm assuming that there was a lot that led up to that moment of you being able to advocate for a certain outcome, right? So
100%.
So the reason, the story I did want to share is I think it happens even within biological cancers, right? Like if I found someone, and this actually happened, and I think back to this so often because I was someone I met at a support group, same age as me, same type of cancer as me, different side of the body, same treatment, completely different outcomes.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just the reality of the medication we're on, right? So when
it's the reality of the human body. We always say it's an art. Of course, it's a science, but medicine is an art too. There's so many things that go into it.
Exactly. So when people compare stories, I personally struggle with that because I'm like,
it's horrible. Yeah.
So hard.
Yeah. It's true, and it's a big thing with social media because there are some people I know that had bone marrow transplants, and because I had a bone marrow transplant,
Yeah.
I would see them and I would even get jealous myself because I'm like, they're working out and they look so good and they're back to doing this and they're fine with this. But then you just can't. Like, comparison is a thief of joy. It's true. Because then there's people who didn't even live. So
I know.
you have to just take what you have and just adapt to it. Do your best.
That's
End of the
literally what I was
day.
going to say. You
know what
know,
I mean? You can't control it. So
yeah, Michael's first diagnosis of autospleen T-cell lymphoma. Like, there's less than 200 documented cases. We do know a handful of people now that have survived, but a lot of people, most of them have not survived. So then we have to go, okay, it's hard. And also the other thing is, you know, I have to be careful too. And I tell myself and I tell other caregivers this because I don't want to say to Michael, well, it sucks, but at least,
you're
because
alive.
that's not fair either. You know,
Yeah,
that's not fair
it's
either.
not fair either. It's true. It's a fine line.
It
of
is.
what you can say that's not. Because, you know, at least you're alive, but you're alive with all this trauma and all these health issues. So it's still hard.
It's still hard. You have to be like, it sucks.
Like,
I'm so glad you're not dead.
Grateful that you're alive. Like, you can be grateful that you're alive, but also mad about the side effects.
Yeah, you can be two things at the same time.
Yeah.
So I want you guys to talk about that, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think I am not a provider, period. But I think a psychotherapist, or someone would call it emotional flexibility, right? The idea that you can like hold two contradicting emotions.
Oh, my emotions are extremely flexible. They're always they're all over the place.
His body is not that flexible, but the emotions, however, are so flexible.
There's something. They're still alive.
I think he got that from me, right? That flexibility. I'll take credit.
Maybe.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna go a little bit morbid, you guys. Yeah, but I think you guys. I'm gonna go a bit morbid. If it's too morbid, pull me back. We're not go that. So the morbid is and this is where it's a lot of learning for me, right? Because I have a type of cancer where there is a lot of data. There is not data for younger women that is at the same level as older women, but there is data, right? So I find a lot of comfort, and then I tip over the edge and it's too much, and I'm trying to find certainty where certainty doesn't exist. But I resort to looking at data because it gives me some semblance of like, okay, all right, control, certainty, life may or may not be there, but I pretend as though it's there. But in your situation, I'm assuming that, and I've heard you say at least once in this episode, that there is not data. And the data that does exist is, well, not great. And it doesn't show a good outlook on life. And you've also gone through it once before. So if you're okay with it, I would love for you to talk a little bit about quantity versus quality, right? Quantity of life versus quality of life. Because that's essentially what we're talking about. And if you guys
yeah, definitely quality of life is really important for us. It's like I always say, you can get diagnosed with a cancer I have chronic diseases like I have all the complications I live with, and live a somewhat long life, and then someone completely healthy can go outside and just get hit by a bus. It's like you don't ever really know. Like, and that's the thing. And like, I know I probably won't live like a super long life, but actually, you know what? Who actually knows? Because you don't know technology. So I don't know. But I think like deep down that I'm not going to live till I'm like 80. Being realistic is what I think. So I'm just living now. I'm in the moment. I'm not trying to worry about that.
You usually say 30, so I'm happy he said 80. I think he's trying to be not that morbid with you.
I'm not trying to be
he said to me the other day,
I want to make it to 30.
I kind of want to make it to 30. And I was like, good goal.
I want to make it to 80, but I realistically, I'm like, okay, let me just make it to 30, and then we can talk about next steps.
But wait, am I interrupting you? Can I say something?
Say whatever you want, girl.
What Michael said, though, that, you as well, Samira, like you've been through this very difficult, everything you've gone through, and there is the data, and so what I want to say is cancer puts the mortality in front of you. Yes, I can walk out the door and I can get hit by a car and I can die today, of course, but there is still a huge, enormous difference in living with cancer or living with a chronic illness afterwards, because your mortality is constantly in front of you. It's reminded twice a week when he gets labs. It's reminded every time there's a scan. It's reminded every time we go to a doctor for a follow-up now for secondary cancers, because we all know the treatments that you have been through. So of course I can think to myself, yes, I'm learning my lessons from Michael and learning my lessons from my husband. I try to embody that I learn those lessons of perspective and living life. But at the same time, I think it is different when you're going through cancer, because it is right there, that death. I'm sorry. And 19-year-old, even if your dad died, you don't think I'm going to die. And even if someone gets hit by a car, you still don't think I'm going to die. You think that sucks and they're unlucky. When you have cancer, you're living with a constant reminder every single day. He's got his port. Like there's just a million things that are reminders of that cancer. So yes, live for today. Of course, yes, gratitude, perspective, but you're constantly being reminded, so, and in a way that is kind of an advantage, because it really does remind you. I think it reminds us, like, on a daily basis, he's taking medications and pills, and so on a daily basis we are thinking about what he's living with, and that is a kind of gift in like a weird dark way. Right.
I very much relate. So
Yeah.
I started a practice. This was I was still in treatment. It's 2021, where I found your like annual calendar, and I found this beautiful calendar and had all like the national parks. It's actually right above my desk, right here. I use it every day. But on the back of it, I wrote down. I started at daily practice of like, if I truly, truly only had today, what would I do with my time? Right.
Yeah.
And it is, and I've done it now for 3 years. I have many calendars now, and I try and find calendars that are beautiful. So I use it, and then I like flip it, right? So I'm looking at these like gorgeous artwork essentially, right? So it's a way of like reframing it and like, tracking life in a different way. And it's amazing to me the kind of things that show up there. And it's been true now for 3 years. That's 3 years worth of like doing this, and it's like, it's a cup of
Hey,
coffee.
what's there? Or do we have to wait for the podcast when we interview you? Is
Yeah.
it too personal to share?
No, not at all. It's usually small things, right? It's like
Yes.
a cup of coffee, a good walk with my dog, calling my mom up. Like it's the small things. It's not
Always.
It really is not the big things, right? It's not like, oh my God, I achieved this big thing in life. It's
No, and that is one of the perspectives of cancer. And that is what happens. Like when I think about Patrice and my husband, what are the things I miss? I I don't miss like when we went on a trip and to Corsica. I mean, it was awesome, but what I miss is coming over the bridge and calling him and saying, I'll be there in like 20 minutes, or you miss those things. I miss at night when he had a way of like touching my hair. Like I miss that. So it's definitely a reminder of the little things. And there was a moment, and I sort of lost my train of thought, but there was a moment when you were just talking that, okay, when I was fighting for Michael for that medication, and I was just like, let's just go home at one point. And this was Michael. He was like, I just want to go home and we'll go off the medication and I'll just go in the ocean. And because he couldn't go in the ocean. And we're like, okay. But then things turned around, and so we did switch it, and he waited to go in the ocean
Yeah.
because then we saw he was going to live. But that moment when we weren't sure, we were like, let's just go off everything and just go
yeah,
for a swim,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't surf, but I scuba dive.
Oh,
Nice.
yes. I used to scuba dive with Patrice.
Such a special place, right? Like the ocean is really special.
Yes.
And I can relate to that emotion. I can definitely relate to that emotion.
That was so hard. And after the BMT, that was one thing. So this is also what happened with Michael is he had his bone marrow transplant and there was there was a plan. And I remember the bone marrow transplant doctor being like, you're going to get your transplant 6 months later, you're going to be in the ocean. That did not happen because he developed so many complications. And so we had this plan. We knew what was going to happen. Day 100, he was going to start to wean off the immunosuppressants. We knew that he was going to go to the hospital. They had told us by day 100, he's going to start going every other week. And then it'll be once a month. And then it'll be once every 3 months. He's still going to the hospital, every single week. And this is 3 years later. And now he has been in the ocean, and it depends on treatment when he can go in.
Well, I'm going to go tonight.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So, but it took not 6 months, it took over 2 years. And now it's still rare, but we can find windows that he can go in. So, it is that whole adapting and you don't know. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna try. This is a very hard episode to try and wrap up because I know it's for hours.
I know.
I know. I'm like, we can say so much more.
We've been going for over 35 minutes.
I haven't even paid attention. Oh my gosh. We can just keep talking. I could talk to you forever.
That's how I feel too. And we do another episode. I know we've agreed to that. So
yes,
we'll definitely continue the conversation. But for this one, I am wondering if you guys can share one thing for someone else who may be going through the cancer experience right now. Right? Any one thing. It could be, I know, sorry, very tall order.
That's hard. That's hard. Well, I'll just say that, well, it's not going to be easy, but it is doable. It is possible. There's a lot of support out there, and you are definitely not alone. You just need to find that support, and it's out there. There are apps, there is social media, there are ways to find other people going through something similar to you, so just don't feel alone.
I'm going to piggyback onto that because I think that's one of the hard parts is when you go through it, and as a caregiver as well, you tend to want to take everything on and just kind of isolate yourself a little bit. Not everyone, but a lot of times it's a very isolating experience. And there's so much research which has nothing to do with cancer, but about longevity and health and happiness, how connection is the key to those, longevity, health, happiness are all, if you have connection, they all improve. So even when you're going through the cancer diagnosis, if you're a caregiver, try to find that connection, whatever it is. Maybe it's a support group. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just one person you can talk to. But if you can find a connection, I truly think that will help. And also when you're in the hospital, make sure you have a cozy blanket because their blankets are horrible. And that is at the children's hospital and at the adult hospital. It doesn't matter. Any hospital.
They're small sheets.
Just get a blanket. That is my advice to you. Get a blanket and your own food because hospital food is not it. So I can give you lots of practical tips too. And aromatherapy, if they'll let you do aromatherapy.
Okay, that's
aromatherapy is awesome
beautiful,
too.
Mother. Thank you.
I love it. That's how we went super deep and then super practical.
Yes.
Love that.
Gotta have both.
Gotta have both.
Wait. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being on this episode. Thank you for honoring me with your time.
Of course.
And for doing what you do for the community because your story makes a huge difference. This is the second time I've got the privilege of listening to it and hearing it. And even the second time around, I had goosebumps. So
you're amazing. We can't wait to talk to you more. We are scheduling more time with you.
Yes. We will do this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice.
We're in the same family.
We are. This is true. This podcast, show notes, and newsletter is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or any materials linked from this blog is at the user's own risk. The content here is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.